Hello and welcome to another Explorer video. Today we're taking a look at the Monoblack discard deck built around Waste Not, a 2-mana enchantment, saying whenever the opponent discards a creature card, we get to make a 2/2 zombie token. Whenever they discard a land, we get to add double black to our mana pool, and whenever they discard a non-creature, non-land card, we get to draw a card instead. So Waste Not is perfect in a deck that's filled to the brim with discard spells, so we get to trigger it and get a lot of value out of it as well. At 1 mana, we've got the classic Thoughtseize, which can take any non-land card at the cost of 2 life, as well as 2 copies of the rest to take away non-creature, non-land cards. Then at 2 mana, we are also playing the full set of Bandit's Talent. When it enters, each opponent discards 2 cards, unless they discard a non-land card, can also level it up, eventually draining the opponent and also drawing us extra cards if the opponent has 1 or fewer cards in hand. And then we're also playing with the full set of Go Blank, making the opponent discard 2 cards, so the classic Mind Rot effect, but we also get to exile their graveyard, because by making the opponent discard, we can potentially set up some of their graveyard synergies, and Go Blank gives us access to main deck Graveyard Hate. And then Liliana of the Veil is also tailor-made for this deck, making each player discard a card with a +1, and the -2 gives us more creature removal, making the opponent sacrifice a creature. And then built into our mana base, we also have 2 copies of Gaia Reach Sanitarium, which is awesome at enabling Waste Not, even if the opponent is empty-handed, as we get to make each player draw a card and then discard a card, so we can maybe randomly get some mana, zombie tokens, or draw a card. And then rounding out the deck, we do need some creature removal. That's where we have the full set of Fatal Push. And then at 2 mana, we've got Go for the Throat, as well as Sheoldred's Edict, can maybe be an answer to opposing Planeswalkers as well. Then we've got a bit more card draw with a Reckoner Bankbuster, eventually making a pilot token so we can animate our vehicle and start attacking. And then also very important is Sheoldred the Apocalypse, since our deck can lose a bit of life to our own Thoughtseize, and we're going to be taking damage from opposing creatures early on, so then later we can stabilize with Sheoldred, gaining us life whenever we draw a card, so great with our Waste Not, our Bankbuster, as well as the Bandit's Talent, so that's how we can eventually take over. And then built into our mana base, we have more utility lands, such as Castle Lochthwain to draw, Hive turning into a 3/3 creature that can also exile cards from the opponent's graveyard, Takenuma we can maybe channel to get a Liliana or a Sheoldred back out of the graveyard, Field of Ruin can answer opposing utility lands, can also maybe mess up the opponent's colors, and then a Sunken Citadel can help us activate cards like Field of Ruin and Sanitarium, as it can make 2 mana for those activations, and finally Urborg can also fix our colors if we draw too many colorless lands, turning all lands into swamps, also a recent addition from Pioneer Masters. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. I think we keep, and this might be a hand where we wait on Thoughtseize until after we Waste Nots, because otherwise we're not going to get much value from it, even though there are situations where turn 1 Thoughtseize could be backbreaking. Let's say we're playing against a hexproof deck and our opponent only has a single 1-mana hexproof creature. Facing a multicolor deck. Could be combo. Opponent's not playing any companions. So I'm thinking of the Quintorius combo deck. Well, we're about to find out. Alright, it is 5-color Niv-Mizzets. And our opponent's hand is pretty strong. Lots of answers to Waste Nots. Night of Autumn kind of hurts, although I guess it's still enters tapped here, the Fabled Passage, so they wouldn't be able to play it. Instead they would Vanishing Verse, which I guess they still cannot cast. So the opponent's mana is a little awkward. So in that case, Colossus is pretty hard for us to answer long term once it hits the battlefields. Beanstalk lets the opponent draw. Pillage can eventually find them some finishers. I mostly want to take a non-creature card so we get to draw 2. So that leaves probably Beanstalk versus Pillage, since they have double verse that they cannot cast. Yeah, they're not triggering Beanstalk anytime soon. And keeping their hand full could actually be an advantage. With double Waste Nots, I'll take the Pillage, which can maybe find more tailor-made answers. Maelstrom Pulse here, for instance, would hurt, answering both Waste Nots at once. Put on Beanstalks. Alright, would be a perfect spot to find another discard spell. If not, I might activate Sanitarium. Bankbuster can play it and draw. I think Sanitarium is better, since that will likely draw 2 or make a pair of zombies. Ooh, Thoughtseize, that's perfect. So, a Fatal Push doesn't seem particularly useful right now. Opponent got rid of a Time Wipe, so we get to draw 2. And still Thoughtseize. And keep the cards flowing. Ooh, Binding, a 1-mana answer, probably what we have to take now. As the most flexible answer that they can cast. Draw 2. And then, if that's the last we might get out of our Waste Knots. Definitely gonna keep Field of Ruin over Swamp. So our opponent's hand is pretty decent. So we're definitely prepared for a longer game. Knight of Autumn also an answer to the Bankbuster, but they might run it out right now. So our opponents, I guess, cannot double Vanishing Verse with Catria Triome, so they're more likely to play the Knight, which then leaves Bankbuster as something they cannot Vanishing Verse. Alright, opponent goes for Clothis, also reasonable, but that means another turn of double Waste Knots, and Duress was perfect. So Duress your Vanishing Verse, most likely, and take it from there. Find a Bandit's Talents, and another one, so we can empty out their hand, pretty much. Yeah, the opponent's mana not working out in the first 2 turns definitely backfired big time. So opponent has to discard a spell, otherwise they have to discard a land and a spell. Goes for Vanishing Verse. And guess what? We've got another talent. And this time we'll get a pair of zombies. Discard a card to hand size. Probably Takenuma. Could also be one Fatal Push, to be honest. But the scary part is that our opponent could still easily top deck their way out of it here with Niv Mizzet or Bring to Light. Time Wipe, that's fine, draws a card. But again, that kind of plays to our advantage with Waste Knot. So we're hoping our opponent didn't draw lands if we try and Thoughtseize here. What's the alternative? So I could Waste Knot, activate Sanitarium, makes it more likely that our opponent keeps a spell in hand and then Thoughtseize afterwards. I would like to get Shieldred going, but this might still be a turn where we set up with our enchantments. And then I'll play the fields. Could also look into activating Field of Ruin to maybe mess up the opponent's mana. But I don't think we're quite there yet. Opponent discarded another Clothis, which now makes 3 zombies. And what else do you have? A Bring to Light, perfect. Draw 3. And now double Bandit's Talent can also be enabled. So we're going off. Swamp can go. Although Clothis has done a good job of draining us alongside our own Thoughtseizes. But Shieldred should be able to stabilize us now. Assuming our opponent didn't top deck. And Duress at the draw. Step 1 is probably to attack. And then second main, I don't hate Shieldred into... Could activate Sanitarium, or I could just Duress and then still play a tapped Citadel and maybe level up a talent. Since we have a second Shieldred, it's not a disaster if this one gets answered. Opponent just had a land. So it could have made a lot of mana had I gone for Gaia Reach, potentially. If our opponent cycles, I guess they also discard, so that would actually enable triple Waste Knot. Although I can't use the floating mana, sadly. Unless we want to channel. But yeah, we're unlikely to get another Shieldred back. So we've flipped the script on our opponents. We're now pressuring their life total, and it's going to go by very quickly. Another beanstalk, not ideal when facing down Shieldreds. So yeah, funnily enough, sometimes you actively want the opponent to draw a few extra cards when playing the Waste Not deck as we draw our final copy. So I'm liking Waste Not, activate Sanitarium, but first we'll attack. In case we need to play another Shieldreds. Opponent's at 2. And then a Sanitarium can do the honors, forcing the opponent to draw, triggering Shieldreds, and winning us the game. Awesome, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Turn 1 Duress, turn 2 Talent, turn 3 go blank. I'll try it. We'll probably need some creature removal eventually, but if our opponent's blue-white control, this hand could line up favorably. And we see a pair of 2-mana counters, Lockdown, Sunfall. So the counter spells are the primary concern at the moment. I'm sure they're going to counter the Talent if I try and cast it here, but that means we can maybe resolve our 3-drops. So that still works for me. So yeah, against control, this hand lines up quite favorably. Not sure yet if I want to play Liliana before go blank to get that going. Yeah, I guess now I'm fine with Liliana first, so we'll have it in play a turn sooner. And then I don't need Citadel. Alright, so step 1, go blank. So if I plus, I get rid of their last card as well. Although I'm not sure if I want to plus here, I think we just stay put. Although it is tempting, since I'll be able to just make them discard again next turn. Ooh, alright, so Deluge was definitely a reason to plus Liliana before exiling their graveyard. Now they'll still be able to flash it back, and they might still have an answer left for Shieldreds. So that's not what we wanted to see. So we'll plus again. Opponent is going to deduce. And again, so at least Shieldred will resolve.
Don't overthink things.
And Liliana's ready to ultimates. Although we might want to keep her in play. Now there's an Anchorage to worry about, but we do have double Field of Ruin. So that's not a huge concern.
You won't be outsmarting me.
I'll wait for them to maybe use their Field of Ruin. Otherwise we can wait. Opponent's at 10. Yeah, I guess I'll use it now. Could also double Field of Ruin, but then they'll have 2 mana left end of turn, which is something I probably want to avoid. But yeah, should have left Field of Ruin untapped here, so we had the chance to maybe still use it. So our opponent's on 6 lanes, can't quite flash back Deluge. We could minus Liliana now. That way, if our opponent has a Wandering Emperor in hand, they wouldn't be able to exile Shieldred with it. Or at least they'll have to play it and we'll know about it. Opponent's gonna float some mana response. And then... yeah, it's gonna be a 3-3 split no matter what. Alright, and then go to attackers. So the floating mana would go away if they have an Emperor in hand, for instance. And yeah, there it is. So now we're just not gonna attack.
Run away. You'll be safer.
And our opponent's just gonna make a Samurai token here.
We must protect the people.
So our opponent still needs an answer to Shieldred.
Strike fast and strike hard.
This attack maybe implies an Elspeth Smite. Next turn if I attack we would at least trade for the Samurai, or I could just let Liliana go and then plan to win with Shieldred without needing to attack. Yeah, I mean this could be a desperation attack too, but it feels like if they didn't have an Elspeth Smite they just wouldn't attack here. Could also be an Aiganjo, I suppose, it also makes sense. Might be more commonly played than Smite.
Oh, that's my cue to leave.
Waste Not doesn't do much at the moment. So yeah, I don't have to attack here, but we'll see if this resolves. Opponent's gonna counter, so now we're safe to attack with Shieldreds. Although then they would chump and then minus the Emperor next turn. So I think we just stay put. 2 more turns and Shieldred can drain them to death. So they can still -2, so we still can't really attack. This attack still implies Aiganjo, which we sort of deduced. So there's no harm in using Field of Ruin on the cave, although there may not be a harm in waiting either. So yeah, Field of Ruin's done a good job dealing with the creature lanes and thinning out the deck as well, although we still drew a swamp. Okay, so just gonna pass and then hope that they fail to draw an answer. 1 unknown plus an Aiganjo in hand. Opponent's gonna plus.
We've got
And
edge
no
in
blocks.
this fight.
And pass a turn. Oh wow, it's gonna be an Otawara to bounce Shieldred, so they bought themselves a turn. So now it's still Aiganjo plus an unknown in hand,
Training.
presumably. And now Thoughtseize can check out if the coast is clear. Alright, there was an Elspeth Smite after all, instead of Aiganjo. Take the Get Lost, so they actually found an answer to Shieldred, but that's no longer gonna work. And our opponent explodes, so super close game here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hands could be okay. It's a little heavy on the lanes, and we don't have any activated abilities either. But I'll try it. And then hopefully find more discard effects to synergize with Waste Not. Could the rest turn 1 against black-white? What deck could this be? Could still be a Greasefang deck, in which case the resting here could maybe take away a Graveyard Enabler. Sure. It is Greasefang, just a Mardu version. Don't really want to take Parhelion, but I guess we have to, don't have a choice. So that could backfire. But our opponent had discard outlets aplenty with fear of missing out, so it's not like we were gonna stop that from happening. Well, Waste Not kind of punishes fear of missing out. Although if they discard a land, I don't have a 2-mana instant to deploy. Alright, never mind, opponent just has Greasefang on curve. Gets back Parhelion, so couldn't really have stopped this, sadly. And next turn we should just be dead. Alright, that'll happen on occasion. Playing a discard deck can help enable certain graveyard synergies if you don't draw your go blank to exile cards from graveyard. And now Liliana is a little bit late to the party. We'll plus just to see what happens.
And I don't appreciate it. We all have things we'd rather forget.
And that's game. Greasefang doing what Greasefang does best. Alright, so on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Thoughtseize into Waste Not, and then double Go Blank to leverage Waste Not. We're on the play, so our opponent's got more cards in hand, and then Phoenix we can eventually exile with the Go Blank. So what to take here? Probably the Ledger Shredder. As a threat our opponent can deploy in the meantime. Even though it's somewhat tempting to take Phoenix and then be able to exile it. With double Go Blank there's a decent chance our opponent will end up discarding it. So our opponent opts. Now Go Blank could potentially enable the Madness on some of the opponent's cards, but that's not a huge concern. So we'll hit them with a double discard. And then Fiery Temper gets Madnessed. But our opponent will have to cast it before we get any potential zombies. We get mana, draw card, and won't be able to use the 2 mana here. Alright, so they still have their Phoenix in hand. They might end up hard casting it, and then we can first Edict and then maybe Go Blank, we'll see. Sanitarium's also very nice with the Waste Not. And a Hive. Alright, so opponent kept up 2 mana. Might just be a Sanitarium turn and be patient on the Go Blank. And then we can activate this in the opponent's turn as well. They want to main phase it, have them discard Phoenix and then be able to get it back. And the more cards they have in graveyard, the easier it is for them to maybe cast a Treasure Cruise with Delve. So want to try and keep the amount of cards in graveyard as low as possible. Our opponent had a Prankster anyway, so that's going to fill the graveyard quite a bit. So worst case scenario, they have a Treasure Cruise here. The Borrower's actually pretty good too, bouncing the Waste Not in response to a Sanitarium activation. So we could also go for Castle, although that one costs a lot of life. So I'll still use a Sanitarium, and then if they want a Brazen Borrower here, that's fine. I think I prefer the untapped lanes, although Hive is gonna have its moments. Yeah, I think I want to be able to 3-drop plus maybe keep up Edict. Opponent discards Phoenix. So that's good to know. So now a Go Blank would be quite effective. But let me start by attacking. If they bounce Waste Not, that's okay, but our opponent's gonna scoop it up to their graveyard getting exiled. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. We have a fine hand. Push on 1, probably Waste Not on 2, and then play the Bandit's Talent. And what are we up against? The red-whites, and it looks like a heroic deck. Yeah, Fatal Push is probably worth it, even though if they play a Virtuoso next turn, for instance, that could be scarier. Yeah, I'll keep my removal, although now Edict also a clean answer. So we'll Waste Not first, and then next turn we can both discard and remove or fire off 2 removal spells if really necessary. Opponent did not start with a Leyline of Resonance, so it's not like we're gonna get one hit KO'd by this Lumimancer right now. Opponent will cast a Homestead Courage and a Defiant Strike to draw. Take 6. Alright, so step 1, probably Bandit's Talent, and see where we're at. Sanitarium is legendary, so we'll probably be discarding the second copy. Opponent did have a slick shot, so we get a zombie. And then could Fatal Push now to play around God's Willing, which the heroic deck typically plays. Could also keep it in hand in case our opponent goes for another pump spell that draws a card, so we get to punish them. I think I should just Fatal Push now, just to be safe. And then Edict plays around God's Willing as well, so if they have it in hand, it may not do much for them. Next turn we can pass, maybe after activating Talents, keeping up either Sanitarium and or Sheoldred's Edict. Alright, opponent had another Slick Shot, which is why they were okay discarding one, and a flashback Homestead Courage. So in that case, just gonna wait on the Sheoldred's Edict, I guess. There's no downside. And we can level this up. I guess the downside is we don't attack for 2, but the potential upside is that we get to waste one of the opponent's cards. Another Slick Shot, that's what we wanted to avoid. I guess we'll Edict now. So we did miss out on 2 damage. Opponent had a Reckless Rage on the way out, that's not a disaster. So they're just holding 1 card. And Edict answers the Slick Shot once again. So if I Sanitarium, I kind of force them to discard one of 2 cards. And then I'll still have the Edict left. And what do we get? A land, so that's 2 mana. Lets me play Waste Not. And keep up Edict. Alright, so we're in decent shape. Can keep leveling up the talent for additional card draw. Virtuoso is probably less scary than the Slick Shot, so we'll Edict now. Because if our opponent does Connive, they end up discarding a card, which triggers Waste Not. So we'll see if they notice. Yeah, opponents immediately discarded and maybe not thinking of Waste Not. And now a Heartfire, so they've got a lot of creatures. And yeah, we're missing removal. I can activate Sanitarium, which will just trigger Waste Not for free, and we'll see what we get. Another Bandit's Talent doesn't do much. But I guess it's better than Thoughtseize here. Get some more mana. So I can level up talents. Play Citadel and pass. Unless we want to just play another talent to eventually deal damage with that as well. Next turn we're scheduled to take at least 5. There's a chance that if our opponent connives and discards a land, I can still activate the Hive. So that's another reason to maybe keep up some mana. So we should get to draw off talent as well. There are a couple pump spells that could maybe win them the game. For now an Arcanist. Alright. So draw, Citadel, and a Swamp. So I just have to activate Sanitarium here, and we'll see what happens. I'll discard probably a Duress at this point. Ooh, our opponent discarded a Homestead Courage, so they can still flash it back out of the graveyard. And then, of course, Arcanist can also get another spell back, so we should be pretty dead now. Anything I can still do here, activate Hive as a blocker. I don't think that saves me. So, yeah, I'm just gonna play a land and pass, and then hope for the best. But I think at this point, our opponent should have it. Unless they start conniving on Virtuoso and maybe draws into more answers. But yeah, opponent goes for Heartfire Hero. So that's 3 damage, and then even if we block with Hive, we should still die. A Defiant Strike, probably targeting the Arcanist itself. So I can try and block. But that's not going to work out. Alright, GG's. So we had a decent position once we answered the opponent's slick shot, but then we didn't really draw well from there. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with keepable hands. We'll need a second black source for Liliana, but can always use Field of Ruin to fix our colors. And for now, we'll have a look. Opponent is playing Yorion as companion, and looks to be a 5-color Niv Mizzet deck. So Liliana actually an answer to Caryatid. Pillage the Bog does become scary the longer the game goes. Pulls a 1-for-1 answer for one of my things. I think I take Pillage, just because it digs the deepest for the opponent's 2-for-1s. And then we're hoping to deploy Liliana as an answer to Caryatid. And then if they remove Liliana, that's not too bad. Opponent gets rid of the Pulse. Doesn't want to discard 2 lands. And there's Caryatid. Alright, found the swamp, so we get to Edict. And then still have a Liliana left over to hopefully work on the rest of the opponent's hand. Field of Ruin also a way to enable Revolt on Fatal Push, should that be necessary, and now Sanitarium. Alright, so probably get rid of Fatal Push. And then we can maybe level up Talents, and then still activate Sanitarium. Our opponent had the binding to answer the Talents. Nope, to get rid of Liliana. So any reason we want to Field of Ruin here to mess up the opponent's mana? They're still missing red, although they have Verge in hand. So they're on all lanes. Yeah, I guess we'll just play a Field of Ruin for now, since I don't necessarily want to let them draw and discard when they have all lands in hand. They may not have basic Mountain in the deck. Start by hitting some of the Triomes. Our opponent's not putting Yorion in hand yet, since they're maybe afraid we'll make them discard it. And now Citadel can be a way to activate Sanitarium on the cheap as well. Could start getting in with Hive, or we can just keep leveling up the talents, which I don't mind. And hope our opponent doesn't draw Niv Mizzet. Or a Bring to Light, for that matter. Yorion in hand. So I can Field of Ruin the Verge. Get rid of their red mana. And then we'll play Sanitarium. But I'll wait to activate it, I think. And there's Yorion, can flicker Binding. But they're not interested. Alright, so let's activate. And then we can still go for the throats. Waste Not could be good. Can even double Waste Not and still activate Sanitarium. Thanks to the Citadel. We get some mana. That's not too useful, sadly, since we discarded Shieldred. Opponent's gonna pass. Draw Thoughtseize. We'll start there. I think. Could also activate Sanitarium and then Thoughtseize, because maybe they'll improve their hands. Although Bankbuster is tempting, but I think we should keep Thoughtseize. We've got Waste Not and Talent as a card draw engine. So we've got mana for Hive. And then hits Hostage Taker double Helix. So now we can take Helix and then draw 2 cards. And then we know not to activate Hive if our opponent still has red mana, which they actually may not. And that'll do it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand needs some discard effects to go with the Waste Not, but we have some cheap removal. Citadel could eventually come in handy. So it's not a great hand, but on the draw it's not bad to have cheap removal. And a Temple Garden into a Mana Elf is gonna meet a Fatal Push. So still not entirely sure which variety of green-white they're playing. A Bishop, so Angels. Fatal Push, potentially not their answer. Although it would be nice to get our Waste Not in play. Yeah, the problem with Bishop is that they likely get to gain 4 right away. But I might want to just get the Waste Not down, hope they don't have a Skyclave Apparition. And then next turn, I probably still need to clean up creatures with Fatal Push into Sheoldred's Edict, so then we're not triggering Waste Not. So then, what's the point of casting it now? Yeah, I guess we'll pass. But yeah, most likely just gonna push the Bishop. At 4 mana we have to watch out for Collected Company. Inspiring Overseer will draw, so that's also pretty good against the discard plane. And it soaks up the Sheoldred's Edict. So now we're maybe okay with the Waste Not. But yeah, this matchup I think is gonna favor the Angel deck. Especially if they draw cards like Overseer, Skyclave, and Collected Company. It's difficult to keep up with our 1-for-1s unless we can hit a big Waste Not with a discard spell. So, play Talents. And then we might be better off leveling up. Although it's not like the Sheoldred's Edict is going to get any better for us. Next turn I can level up twice. We get a 2/2 token. And a Resplendent can block it. Alright, the rest. Can maybe snipe a company before they get a chance to cast it. So that means having to play it now. And they did have company and then a bunch of elves. So their hand's not impressive. Although our hand is non-existent, so doesn't mean much. They might also decide to keep some elves in hand so they don't enable the talent to draw. Although then they're maybe unable to cast a Collected Company, but yeah, opponent's just going for it now. And then they can maybe activate the Resplendent's ability, giving +2/+2 and lifelink. Now Field of Ruin can still enable Fatal Push to enable Revolt to answer an Angel. So that would still help, but looks like our opponent will get to make an Angel token now. And that's not something we can really beat in this position. This is a matchup that could improve by adding a couple sweepers. Cards like Extinction Event are pretty good, since your opponent has lots of 1 and 3 drops. So that would answer the opponent's entire board. And yeah, opponent's going for it. Draw Thoughtseize and a Go Blank, but our opponent only has 1 card in hand. So we should just beat that here. So in the end, there was just 1 unanswered Resplendent Angel going the distance. But also showcased the limitations of Sheoldred's Edict at times, not being able to pinpoint whatever creature we want to remove. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Got to Waste Not into Go Blank and Talent. up against a red-green aggro. Shielder is probably going to be pretty useful once we need to gain life to stabilize. And then probably going to hit them with a go blank. If they discard a land, we get the mana to maybe still cast another 2-drop afterwards. And the red-green deck with Burning Tree Emissary is pretty good at emptying their hand quickly. So let's go blank. Alright, opponent got rid of some lands. I guess the smashing, technically not a land, so it made us draw. And then now probably just go for the throat on the Iconoclast. And then next turn I could still Waste Not into a talent. Save ourselves 4 damage. Yeah, being on the play is definitely a big deal in this type of matchup. Take 5. And a Thoughtseize. Cannot take a land, which is secretly what we want to make them discard. Could just play a Shieldred to try and stabilize. And then next turn keep making them discard. I think that's reasonable. Because yeah, with a talent, they're unlikely to have a ton of lands to discard. And that's kind of what we want, to be able to cast more spells afterwards. Although I guess there's a decent chance we'll get some zombies as well. So maybe Waste Not into talent isn't crazy. And then next turn we can Shieldred plus Thoughtseize, also making sure they don't have a potential answer to Shieldred, like a Witchstalker Frenzy comes to mind. So there's arguments for both, but our opponent's just gonna concede here to double Waste Not into a talent. Alright, so we get to see our Monoblack discard deck in action, and it's certainly a deck with some polarizing matchups. If we're facing decks that are very aggressive, that can quickly empty their hand, those can be a little bit more difficult, since some of our discard spells are going to be ineffective if the opponent's already empty-handed. Cards that can put a lot of permanents in play at once, cards like Collected Company come to mind. Those are also harder for us to answer with our 1/1 removal spells, so that's where having access to Sweeper is going to be useful. And then some graveyard decks like Greasefang, if they can get off to a quick start and we don't have the right interaction, can also potentially catch us off guard. But if we're facing more controlling decks that are prepared for longer games, we're usually pretty well equipped to beat those with our many discard effects and card draw engines that are often enchantments that are harder for the opponent to interact with. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.